He told them I died, that their granny was gone. I found out when the youngest sent a drawing to a headstone that didn't exist. But I didn't cry. I ordered wrapping paper. He didn't even spell my name right on the fake grave online. Just a blurry photo of flowers and a caption that said I'd passed peacefully. No date, no obituary, just vanished. Like I never held his hand when his fever wouldn't break. Like I never sold my wedding ring to pay for his college books. I sat there with the lights off and the television humming, holding a plastic angel he gave me when he was 8. I stared at it so long my eyes stopped blinking. Dead. That's what they think I am. My grandbaby's thinking their granny is bones in the ground while I'm still here eating soup alone. I never got loud. Never called to scream. Just sat there in that stiff dining chair. The one he left behind when he moved her in. She never liked me. Called me the shadow in his past. Now I guess she got what she wanted. No shadow, no granny. Just silence. But you see, silence can wrap gifts too. I wrapped one for each of them. Birthday cards with stickers, glitter, and notes written in the shaky hand of a ghost. Love you forever, Granny. I mailed them with no return address. Just heaven's handwriting. That was the start. That's when I knew I wasn't gone. I wasn't dead. I was waiting. Waiting to be seen. And oh, they would see me. Not with flowers and tears, but with little boxes that whispered, Granny remembers. I gave more than I had. That's the truth. I didn't have riches. I didn't have a strong back, not for long. But I had time and hands and a heart that kept going, even when no one noticed. I sewed. I stayed. I smiled through the silence. When my son was little, I worked nights cleaning offices so I could walk him to school in the morning. I packed his lunch with cloth napkins I embroidered myself. Little animals. A bear, a duck, once a crooked elephant. He never noticed, but I like to think they kept him company. I remember watching his feet swing under the cafeteria table once, when I snuck in to drop off a forgotten inhaler. He didn't see me, but I saw him. That was enough. I sewed. I stayed. I smiled through the silence. His father left when he was 10, said he couldn't breathe with so much responsibility, said he'd call. Never did. I didn't cry in front of my boy. I just made grilled cheese and let him sleep in my bed for a week. I got a second job and found quiet ways to hide the struggle. He never knew I pawned my mother's brooch for his school trip, or that I taped my shoes from the inside when winter came early. But that's what mothers do. That's what I did. I stayed. I stayed even when he grew tall and silent and stopped hugging me goodbye. I stayed when the holidays got quiet and the phone stopped ringing. I stayed in that old house, folding laundry no one wore anymore, setting 2 places just in case he showed up. And when he finally did come back years later, it wasn't alone. He had her. Sharp voice, sharp perfume, sharp eyes. She didn't like my house. Said it smelled like old paper and boiled cabbage. Said the kids would get scared of the creaky floors. I told her creaky floors hold memories. That didn't go over well. I baked banana bread every Sunday. Set it on the counter. They never came. I left little gifts for the children in a basket by the door chalk. Paper dolls. Soft mittens I crocheted when my hands weren't shaking. He said not to push myself on them. So I didn't. I just made extras and put them in the closet. Drawer after drawer of soft things for children who never called me Granny. I sewed. I stayed. I smiled through the silence. I watched them grow through Facebook photos. Watched birthdays pass. Watched his life unfold like I was the distant cousin no one remembers. And still, I smiled. I wrote letters I never mailed. Dear sweet Mia, I heard you lost your first tooth. Did the tooth fairy come? Dear Lucas, your father used to love trucks too. I kept them in a box with old buttons and dried lavender. My small garden wilted, but I still planted. Still trimmed the roses, even when no one came to see them bloom. The last time I saw themmy grandchildren, they were toddlers. He told them I was a neighbor. I wasn't confused. I was calculating. I tucked that moment deep inside me like a thorn under the skin. The house felt too big after that. Too clean. Too still. I stopped baking. I stopped talking to the photos on the wall. But I never stopped remembering. I remembered the way his tiny hand used to reach for mine in crowded places. I remembered the first time he called me Mama through the door after a nightmare. I remembered dancing with him in the kitchen while the kettle hissed. I remembered every sacrifice like it was stitched into my skin. And I told myself, this is what love is. You give, you sow, you stay. You smile through the silence until one day someone tries to bury you in it. And they think you won't rise. But I did. Not loud, not fast, quietly, like bread rising slow in the oven, like the tide creeping back in, like a name whispered instead of shouted. Granny. I hadn't heard it in years, but I still knew how it sounded, still knew how it felt in my bones. So I found a pen. I found wrapping paper. I wrote like I'd never stopped, because I hadn't. Not really. I was just waiting, just buried under their forgetting. But I was still here. I sewed. I stayed. I smiled through the silence. And now, I was ready to be remembered. When the visits slowed, when the calls came only for money, I told myself they were busy, not gone. I told myself a lot of things. That his wife didn't mean to sound cold, that the children were just shy, that families change with time. I told myself I was being too sensitive when he stopped staying for tea, when he started standing instead of sitting, looking at the clock instead of at me. I watched the shift happen like slow fog crawling in. At first, I thought it was just the weather, a season passing through, but it stayed. It thickened. And I, like a fool, tried to smile through it. He used to call me on Sundays. Then only when he needed help filing something, or when her car broke down. Then it was text messages. Can you send $200? Promise I'll pay you back. Do you still have the spare stroller? Hey, I listed your address for delivery. I said yes. Every time. My voice calm. My heart whispering. He's still your boy. And the first time he didn't come inside, just waved from the driveway, I told myself he had a cold. Didn't want to make me sick. Kind. He was being kind. That's what I said as I watched them pull away. Her looking at her phone. The kids strapped in the back, not even looking toward the house. They didn't know it was mine. Didn't know I planted the tree they parked under. I kept the guest room ready. Fresh towels. Books I thought they'd like. I learned to bake gluten-free because she mentioned the kids had allergies. I bought little name plaques from the craft store. One for each child. Glued on buttons and stars. Hung them on the door. They never came. Not once. And still, I held on. I cleaned that room every Friday, just in case. I changed the calendar. I baked 2 kinds of muffins just in case they changed their mind. The mailbox stayed empty except for bills. The driveway stayed bare. But I lit the porch light every evening. There were hints, quiet ones. Like when I left a gift at their door for the baby's birthday, and it disappeared, but no one called to say thank you. Or when I sent a Christmas card and it came back, address not recognized. I called and asked if they moved. He said no, just a mailing error. I believed him. Because mothers do. Because even when the glass is cracking, we stare at the reflection and call it whole. I started to notice the silence in his voice. Not anger, not love. Just absence. Like I was calling into a tunnel. Words going in, nothing coming back. I asked once if the children remembered me. He said, "You're not part of their daily life, Mom. It's confusing." I laughed. A quiet, dry sound. Not part of their life. As if I hadn't stitched his socks when we couldn't afford new ones. As if I didn't carry both of them in one arm and groceries in the other. I wanted to say that, but I didn't. I said, "Okay." I said, "I understand." Because maybe I still wanted to. I stopped asking to visit. I started sending things instead. Packages, little notes, a book with my handwriting inside. The books never came back, but they also never showed up in their shelves online. One day I saw a video her recording the children opening gifts. Gifts I didn't send. Gifts from Daddy's side only. The kids clapped and cheered. No mention of me, not even a whisper. I was invisible. I told myself maybe they'd say my name off camera. Maybe my gifts got lost. Maybe. I held on to maybes until they turned into dust in my hands. Then the big sign came. The one I couldn't explain away. I called to say happy birthday to Lucas. Her voice answered, "Sharp, quick." "Wrong number," she said. But I hadn't spoken yet. She hung up. I tried again. Blocked. Tried his number. Blocked. I emailed. No reply. The last message I got was from a mutual friend. He told everyone you passed away quietly last winter. My heart didn't stop. It slowed, like water freezing. I stared at those words. Passed away. Quietly. As if I was a package returned with no sender. I didn't scream. I didn't rush to prove I was alive. I just sat in my chair, my hands folded in my lap. My tea had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I watched the shadows stretch across the room and thought, so this is how they bury people now. No funeral. No flowers. Just forgotten. I thought of the children. The lies they'd been told. I thought of all the times I'd excused the silence. All the ways I'd convinced myself this wasn't betrayal. But it was. Slow, careful, intentional. And still, a part of me wanted to believe it wasn't him. That maybe she had done it. That maybe he didn't know. That somewhere, the boy I raised was still in there, too tired or too broken to reach for me. But denial is a soft blanket that suffocates. I knew. Deep down, I knew. He made a choice. A quiet one. A cruel one. He turned the page before I was ready. Wrote my ending without asking. I didn't want to believe it. But belief isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's the only thing left when the door stays closed. They deleted me like a voicemail. Left unheard, then erased. Not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. But with polite nods and empty promises. Smiling, always smiling. That's what haunts me most. The way they smiled while carving me out of their lives, like I was mold on the bread, a nuisance, not a mother. It started small. A few missed thank yous. A few gifts unopened. But then it became clearer, sharper, like glass in warm water. One day, I noticed the family photo on his mantle, the one I had taken, back when the kids were toddlers, and I stood behind the camera while they all waved. That photo used to sit by the clock. Now it was gone. Replaced with something shiny, something new. Me, removed. No questions, no reason, just not there. They came to my house one last time. I didn't know it would be the last. He said they were doing a cleanup, offered to help me sort the garage. I thought it was kind. I made lemonade, wore my nice cardigan. She showed up with a clipboard, said the house was too much for someone my age. Asked if I had a will. Said it like she was asking about the weather. I remember laughing. A small, confused sound. Then I saw her look. Not surprised, not embarrassed. Just waiting. Like she already had the answer written down. They walked through every room. Touched things I hadn't moved in years. My old record player. My mother's silver set. The quilt I'd made with scraps from my wedding dress. She took pictures. For insurance, she said. But I saw her scrolling Zillow on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, they left with boxes. Labeled things donate without asking. Took my books, my casserole dishes, my wedding album. I stood in the doorway holding a chipped mug and said nothing. Because what do you say when your life is being packed up by people who call it a favor? I kept waiting for my son to stop it. To say, not that, Mom loves that. But he didn't. He nodded. He smiled. He told her which drawer had my jewelry. I watched them go through my dresser, my private things, my nightgowns. She held one up and laughed. Vintage, she said. My cheeks burned. I hadn't felt that kind of heat in years. The kind that makes you wish you could disappear. They emptied out my kitchen drawers. Said they were old and mismatched. Called my life clutter. Took my memories and labeled them non-essential. I found a list in her purse when she left it on the couch. It had my name at the top. Underneath, house estimate, power of attorney. Granny's jewelry check value. She didn't call me Mom. Not even my name. Just Granny. Like a category. Like a loose end to be tied up. And still, I cooked them dinner. Set the table. Lit a candle. My son barely touched his food. The children played on their tablets. No one looked up when I asked about school. I cleared the plates quietly. In the hallway, I heard her say, "This place could be flipped in 6 weeks." And he said, "She'll come around." No one asked me. No one waited for me to speak. They assumed, decided, took, smiling, always smiling. A week later, a man in a suit showed up, said he was a transition specialist, asked when I'd be ready to move. Move? I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed. He had paperwork. My name was on it sloppy, uneven. I didn't remember signing. Maybe I had. Maybe I was tired. Maybe they caught me between pills and pain and polite small talk. I called my son, no answer. Texted, no reply. The next time I saw him was on a video. A birthday party for Mia. Everyone gathered. Everyone but me. She wore the dress I'd made. My stitching. My buttons. He told someone, "Granny passed a few months ago." Peacefully. That was it. That was the moment. Not even a pause in his voice. Not even a blink. Just the next sentence. About the cake. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Like it was giving up. Like it was learning to disappear. I stood in my new apartment. The one they picked, white walls, no curtains, smells like bleach, and watched the screen in silence. They had taken my home, my things, my name, and now they had taken my existence. Erased me like I was dust. A mistake on paper. A story too inconvenient to tell. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was still in that cold place. The place between betrayal and belief, where you stare at your own hands and wonder if you ever mattered. I looked at my fingers, the ones that sewed their clothes and packed their lunches and turned the pages of their favorite bedtime books. I looked at those fingers and whispered, "They don't remember." And then I looked at the stack of birthday cards I had written, tucked away in my drawer, still blank inside, but addressed. Mia, Lucas. I wasn't dead. I wasn't even done. I was just erased. But you know what happens when you erase something too quickly? The paper thins. It wears. And if you press again softly, quietly, the truth starts to show through. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to write. I was going to send. I was going to remind them that ghosts don't disappear. They whisper. They remember. They wait. They told the kids I was gone. So I wrote their birthdays on the wall every year, every name, like seeds. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I wasn't screaming. I was writing. In the quiet hours of morning, before the nurse walked by, before the neighbors shuffled in the hallway, I sat with a pencil and remembered everything. The day Mia was born, the way Lucas kicked his blanket off in his sleep, I etched it all onto that wall. Not with paint, just tiny markings behind the curtain where no one could see but me. A silent garden. My memory, blooming. I made a list. Not of what I'd lost, I already knew that. I made a list of what I still had. My mind, my hands, my time. I had stamps. I had glitter. I had the smell of cinnamon that still clung to the pages of my recipe book. I had my voice, not loud, but clear. They thought I was buried, but I wasn't underground. I was undergrounding, rooting, reaching, planning. They erased me like a smudge, but I still had ink, and I still knew how to write my name. The first card was for Lucas. I used a picture of a rocket ship. Wrote, "To the moon and back, Granny." Just that. No return address. No explanation. Just my handwriting. My words. It traveled from my fingers to a mailbox to a house that used to be mine. A stranger might have thrown it out, but not a child. Children know when something is meant for them. They feel it, even if no one else does. I pictured him holding it, opening it, asking questions. Who sent this? I imagined her brushing it off. I imagined my son going quiet. I imagined a seed planted. Then Mia's card, pink paper, a drawing of a teacup. Inside, always time for tea. Love, Granny. I slipped in a tiny pressed flower, one from my balcony garden. Still fragrant if you leaned in close. I wanted her to smell it, to wonder, To feel something stir that no one could explain away. I mailed it the same way. No name on the envelope. Just her handwriting on the front. The way I used to write it when she practiced the alphabet on my kitchen table. I wasn't rushing. I had time. And time is power when no one's watching you. I wrote to them not as a ghost, but as a grandmother who never left. I sent small things, bookmarks, stickers, a photograph of my hands holding a storybook. No face. Just the hands. Familiar if you've sat in their lap before. I wasn't trying to scare them. I was trying to stir them. Wake up a piece of their hearts they didn't know was asleep. I started writing in a notebook too. Not for them. For me. I made a timeline. A journal. Every time they said goodbye with a smile. Every time they took something without asking. Every birthday missed. Every lie told. I wasn't holding on to it out of anger. I was collecting truth. So when they came back and they would, I wouldn't let my heart forget what had happened. I wouldn't brush it under the rug like I had done all my life. This time, I'd remember. They thought they'd taken my story from me. But they hadn't taken the pen. I bought new stationery. Soft blues and golds. I practiced my writing, so the letters were steady. Not perfect, just mine. I watched the mailman from the window. He didn't know he was carrying messages from the dead. It made me smile. A small one, but real. I started humming again while I worked. I wasn't grieving. I was crafting. Not revenge. Not noise. Just truth. Once, I overheard the woman down the hall, saying her granddaughter didn't remember her name. I leaned over and whispered, "Write it down. Every week. They can erase pictures, but they can't erase paper." She smiled, confused. But I knew. Paper stays. Ink lasts. Glitter sticks. Memory is stubborn, especially when planted with care. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. It wasn't their business. It wasn't even about justice, not yet. It was about being real, showing up, one envelope at a time, and not just for the children. For me, I started writing recipes again, ones my mother taught me. I wrote blessings, too, little poems. I left one in the library book I returned. Another tucked into a box of tea at the grocery store. Not for anyone in particular. Just for the world to feel me again. You see, grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sharpens. Sometimes it sits at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and writes your name over and over until it feels whole again. They thought I'd faded. I hadn't. I was clearer than I'd ever been. I knew what they'd done, how they'd done it, and how I'd undo it, not with fire, not with fights, but with memory, with love they couldn't trace or control, with cards from nowhere, with birthdays remembered. I wasn't screaming. I was writing. And in that silence, I felt something return. Not power, not pride, just presence. A kind of quiet thunder inside me, a storm that didn't flash. It hummed, ready, patient, sure. I took it all back, quietly. Not with shouts or courtrooms or broken glass. 2 number. I took it back the way I'd given it, with care, with patience, with steady hands that had learned to sew broken things back together. They thought they'd left me with nothing, but they forgot one thing. I was still alive. And the living aren't done yet. I started with the papers, the real ones, not the ones they shoved in front of me when I was dizzy and tired, not the ones they whispered over like bedtime stories meant to put me to sleep. No, I found the old documents, the ones with my full name, signed with clarity, the deed, the will, the letters from my husband back when we were young and planning everything from scratch. I made copies, careful ones. I mailed the will to a lawyer and the silence to my son. The lawyer was kind, wore soft sweaters, and listened without blinking too much. She didn't talk to me like I was fragile. She talked like I was fire, said I had a case, said what they did wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. She asked for details. I gave them, all of them, dates, names, what they took, what they said. I had notes, pages. I wasn't confused. I was calculating. Every box they carried, every lie they told, every paper they forged, it was all there, tucked into the spiral notebook I kept under my knitting. I handed it to her. She nodded once, sharp and quiet. I didn't tell my son. I didn't warn him. I let him enjoy the silence he gave me. I let them think the game was over. Meanwhile, I was planting, watering, feeding my little army of truth. I found my cousin's boy smart with computers and sharper with records. He helped me track every transaction. My jewelry sold online. My house listed under a fake LLC. My things pawned and hidden. He printed it all out for me. In color. Highlighted. Tagged. I bought a binder. Labeled it, "For when they pretend I don't exist." They tried to sell the house. The one I raised him in. The one with the marks on the door frame where we measured his height every year. But I had never signed it over. Not legally. I filed the hold myself. Quietly. They got the call. The paperwork bounced. The sale stalled. I imagine her face. All that lipstick. And no power. I imagine his silence. That hollow, echoing silence he always used to win. This time, it didn't work. Then came the accounts. The frozen ones. The retirement fund they helped manage. I got it back. All of it. Changed passwords, locked it down. My lawyer sent them letters. Neat, firm, final. They tried to call. I didn't pick up. Let it ring. Let them hear what they gave me. Silence. I changed the beneficiaries too. Took their names off everything. Every policy, every account. It felt like erasing chalk off a board, slow, satisfying. I added new names. Not family, no. Family doesn't mean blood anymore. Family is the woman who walks my groceries in when it rains. The nurse who rubs my shoulder when the pills make me nauseous. The librarian who remembers what kind of stories I like. I put them in my will, gave them my books, my quilts, my teacups, my memories. They earned them with kindness, with eye contact, with care. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept mailing those birthday cards, kept writing little notes, because the children, they weren't part of this. Not really. They were told a story, and one day, they'd learn it wasn't true. And when they did, they'd find the trail I left behind, the drawings I kept, the toys I'd hidden in a box labeled just in case, the photos, the letters, the love that hadn't rotted or turned bitter, the truth folded and pressed and waiting. They stopped calling altogether after that. No emails, no packages, just silence. But it wasn't mine this time. It was theirs. And silence, when chosen, is power. I cooked again, just for me. Bought a blue chair for my balcony. Saturday in it every morning with my coffee and felt the sun on my knees. I wasn't hiding. I was living. I took it all back. Quietly. Poetic justice doesn't need applause. It doesn't need an audience. Just a steady hand and a long memory. They wrote me off like a mistake, but I rewrote the ending. Tidy, legal, permanent. I was never the storm. I was the tide. You don't notice it moving until everything shifted. And by then, it's too late. I didn't yell. I sent gifts. No warnings, no long letters, just soft packages and silence. They'd already decided I was gone, so I let them believe it. Let them tell the children I had passed away quietly in some unnamed winter. Let them weave their little bedtime lie. Granny's in heaven now. Fine. I made heaven a little noisy then. On their birthdays, they got cards in shaky, cursive. Love, Granny in heaven. And toys wrapped in paper I bought alone. I chose each one carefully. Not out of spite, out of memory. Lucas always loved trains. Mia had a thing for anything sparkly. So I sent them what they'd loved, wrapped in soft blues and pinks. No logos, no receipts. Just the warm press of a familiar scent rose lotion, the kind I used when they were small and sat in my lap. I didn't try to prove anything. I didn't sign my full name. I just let the handwriting speak. And if they asked where it came from, well, ghosts don't have return addresses. One day, I sent a music box. The same kind I used to keep on my dresser, the one Mia used to sneak into my room to wind up. I found another just like it at a flea market. Polished the brass until it gleamed. Tucked a note inside. Wind me when you miss me. That was all. Another time, I sent a photo, not of me, of my hands holding a flower. Just the hands. wrinkled, soft, familiar. If you ever held them while crossing the street, they never wrote back. But I didn't expect them to. This wasn't about getting replies. This was about planting weight. Quiet reminders they couldn't throw away as easily as they'd thrown me. Each gift a whisper in the corner of a room. Each envelope a soft knock at the door of their memory. I imagined the silence after they opened them. The flicker in her face. The pause in his step. Did they tell the kids? Did they hide them? Or did they pretend again? Like nothing happened? You can't silence the truth forever. It comes back. Sometimes in court. Sometimes in paper trails. And sometimes in a glittery sticker book that no one remembers buying. That's what I wanted. Confusion. The kind that grows into questions. I wanted the children to ask, "Who sent this?" And I wanted them to see him shift in his seat. I wanted them to see her lips tighten. Not loud, not angry, just enough to make the story tremble. I heard once that a lie has short legs. It can run, but not for long. And I wasn't chasing. I was walking. Steady. Certain. Each card I sent was a little mirror. And one day, one of those mirrors was going to make them flinch. Not because it was cruel, but because it was kind. Because it reminded them of what they chose to forget. And kind things, when undeserved, are the sharpest of all. I sent a small quilt once. Doll-sized, hand-stitched. Tucked in a note that said, "Granny used to make big ones. I hope this keeps something small warm." I wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with gold string. No name, just a story they couldn't erase. If they threw it away, the children would ask why. If they kept it, they'd hold something I made. Either way, I had them. Quietly, elegantly. One morning, I mailed them both the same card. No glitter this time. Just plain white paper. Inside, "He used to call me Mama. Now he calls me Gone." I almost didn't send it. It felt too much. But then I remembered how they'd stood in my home, touching things with greedy fingers, smiling. And I folded the card shut and walked it to the mailbox. Not to hurt, just to hold up a mirror. A clean one. No frame, no filter. This was my justice. No lawyers, no judges, no loud revenge. Just me, reminding them I still knew how to love even when unloved. I still knew how to give even when emptied. That was the part they couldn't take. They took my house, my name, my place at the table. But they couldn't take my knowing. Couldn't touch the part of me that remembered lullabies, midnight fevers, sticky kisses on my cheeks. Those belonged to me, and I used them like arrows tipped in honey. Sweet, but they still landed. Somewhere, maybe in the back of a drawer, there's a child's hand touching a sticker book, a music box, a doll quilt. They don't know where it came from, but something in their chest stirs. And someday, it'll bloom. Not like fire, like memory. Gentle and certain. And they'll ask, who was she really? And maybe then the truth will rise. Not because I shouted, but because I whispered, over and over, until the silence cracked. They called. I didn't pick up. The phone rang 3 times that week. First, his number, then hers, then one I didn't recognize, but I knew. I sat in my chair and let it ring. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I was full. And full people don't chase crumbs. I stirred honey into my tea and listened to the silence between the rings. It was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. They said it was a misunderstanding. I said nothing peace is loud when it's earned. The voicemail came on a Sunday. His voice? Shaky. Mom, I didn't know all of it. I think we need to talk. That word, need, like I was a faucet to be turned on when thirst showed up. I listened, then deleted it. No rage, no tears, just a quiet click and the soft clink of my spoon in the cup. Another call. There's been some confusion. Mia keeps asking questions. Maybe we can clear things up. I smiled. Just a little. It had begun. The undoing. Not by force, but by truth. Soft and steady. The kind that doesn't yell, just waits. until someone finally listens. They mailed a letter, handwritten, addressed properly. The envelope had real stamps. Inside, an apology wrapped in excuses. We thought we were protecting the kids. We didn't know how to explain things. You were never really gone. We just drifted. Drifted. Like I was a piece of wood on some tide they couldn't control. But I remembered every push, every silence, every lie. And still, I didn't answer. I lit a candle that night for no one but myself. Lavender and mint. My favorite. I sat with it flickering and told myself, you don't owe them your breath to prove you're alive. He tried again. Left a second message. Longer this time. Said Mia had been crying. Said Lucas kept asking who sent the music box. Said they felt guilty. I paused then. Guilt is heavy, but so is love unreturned. And I had carried mine far longer. I didn't need to hand it back to them now, so I didn't. I folded their guilt like old linen and placed it in the drawer of things I no longer wore. I went to the park the next morning, fed the birds, wore my green coat. A child smiled at me. I smiled back. No explanations, no labels, just two people alive in the same sunlight. That was enough. I walked home slowly, listening to the gravel under my shoes. Each step soft, real, not erased, not rewritten. A neighbor waved. Heard from your family lately? I nodded once. Some things don't need to be answered, I said. She smiled like she understood. Maybe she did. We all have ghosts that ring our phones sometimes. Another envelope came. Thicker. Legal. Inside, an offer. Reparations, they called it. Money. An apology written in numbers. I tore it in half. Not in anger, I just didn't want pieces of their guilt in my home. I'd built something better here. A life with soft music and warm food. Letters from people who meant it. Silence. Not from neglect, but from peace. The truth is, I didn't want them back. Not like that. Not rushing in with explanations and performances. I wanted them to sit with the space they created. To feel the shape of my absence. To hear the echo when the children asked, "What happened to Granny?" And to know they couldn't lie anymore. That was justice. That was enough. I didn't hate them. Hate takes up too much room. I just moved on. Made new friends. Painted again. Cooked for the neighbor's daughter when her mama worked late. I wore lipstick some days. Not for anyone, just because I still liked how it looked in the mirror. I sent one final card to Mia. Just one line. Some angels watch from very close by. No name. No address. Just a quiet ending to a long song. And when the phone rang again months later, I smiled at it. Let it ring until it stopped. Until the blue screen faded back to calm. I didn't need to answer. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. Maybe I was the root, the anchor, the thread holding things together so tightly they didn't notice until they pulled me loose. And when everything unraveled, they thought the thread was to blame. But it wasn't. It never was. I wasn't the problem. I was the proof that something once held, something real, something steady. I see that now. Not with anger, with softness. With the kind of knowing that comes when you've sat alone long enough to hear your own heartbeat again. Not for them. For me. I spent years thinking I was in the way. That my presence made things harder. That my voice was too much or too little or just plain unwanted. I shrunk myself to fit inside their lives. Bit my tongue so many times it should have scarred. But it didn't. Because I healed, quietly. Like skin under a bandage. Away from light. I remember the first time I made tea just for me and didn't cry when no one joined me. I drank it hot, with honey, and read a book from start to finish. No interruptions, no waiting. Just peace. Real peace. They said I was old. Said I was confused. Said I didn't know what I was doing. But I remembered birthdays they forgot. I remembered how they liked their soup, their stories, their socks folded just so. I remembered the sound of their voices when they were still mine. And I remembered the silence after the kind they used. Like a weapon. And called it space. But I know now, Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's full of truth, of boundaries, of grace. I'm not angry they left. I'm grateful I saw who they were when the lights were on. I'm grateful they taught me what not to accept anymore. I used to think love meant holding on, even when it hurt. Now I know better. Love isn't sacrifice without return. Love isn't disappearing for someone else's comfort. Love is showing up, even if no one claps. And I showed up, every time. I showed up with lunch bags, with lullabies, with late-night rides and early morning hugs. I was never missing. They just stopped looking. I still dream of them sometimes. The kids, mostly. In those dreams, they're small again. They run into my arms, full speed, and we fall into a pile of blankets and laughter. No lies, no distance, just warmth. I wake up and don't cry anymore. I smile, because even if it never happens again, it did once. And that's mine. They can't take that. I've filled my home with things that breathe. Plants, books, music, nothing too loud, nothing too sharp. Just soft life that grows. A young woman from the church visits on Thursdays. She calls me Miss Nora, even though I told her she can just say Nora. She brings her baby. I hold him sometimes. He curls into me like my own used to. His little hand grabs my finger, and I feel remembered in a way words can't reach. I've started writing again. Not cards, not journals, just memories. Little pieces of my life I want to leave behind, not for them, but for me. So I can see, on the page, that I was more than useful. I was loved, even when they forgot how to show it. I was real, even when they tried to erase me, and I was never the ghost. People ask if I'm lonely. Sometimes, but not often. There's a difference between alone and lonely. I've learned to enjoy my own company, my own breath, my own meals. I set the table for one, and it still feels full. I light candles. I use the good plates. I listen to the music I like, not the kind that made everyone else comfortable. I laugh more now. Not loud, but real. Like the sound of something being found again. They buried a version of me. The version they found inconvenient. The one they could edit out of the story. But I was never the ghost. They were. They were the ones who disappeared, who lived inside half-truths and convenience, who closed the door and convinced themselves it was kind. And that's their weight to carry, not mine. Mine is lighter now, filled with lavender and tea and morning sun, filled with the hum of a life reclaimed. I look in the mirror and see a woman who gave her all, and when her all wasn't wanted, she gave it to herself instead. I see someone who didn't yell, didn't break, didn't vanish. I see someone who waited in the quiet and rose anyway. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. Maybe I was the blessing they weren't ready to hold. And that's okay, because I'm holding me now. Steady, strong, and so very alive. There are more of us than they know. Women like me. Women who gave and gave until we forgot what it felt like to be full. We bake casseroles and bury pain. Smile through betrayal. Laugh softly at things that hurt. We remember everyone's birthdays but our own. We keep the photo albums. We keep the peace. We keep the pieces even when they fall apart in our hands. And for a long time, we think that's love. That disappearing into everyone else's needs means we matter. That silence is noble. That selflessness is the price of motherhood, of womanhood, of worth. But some of us also bloom after winter. Some of us, when pushed into the ground and left there, grow roots, deep ones, quiet ones. And slowly, we come back. Not in a way they expect, not loud, not in flames. We come back in the mail, in the ink of a birthday card, in the smell of a kitchen that still knows how to make comfort from scratch, in the gentle way we fold towels, or touch a cheek, or hum a song that our mothers once hummed to us. I thought I was alone. For a long time. I thought my silence was unique, my shame special. But I wasn't the only one written out of the story. I wasn't the only one erased with a smile and called too much. I've met others, in waiting rooms, in line at the pharmacy, at church, during the quiet parts. We don't always speak it aloud, but we recognize each other. the long sigh, the careful words, the look that says, I used to belong too. We nod to one another. Sometimes that's all it takes. A look that says, you're still here. Me too. Some of us are raising grandchildren alone. Some of us are watching from afar while strangers raise the ones we once rocked to sleep. Some of us never had children, but carried everyone else's burdens anyway. And now we're learning to carry our own names again. With pride, it's not too late. That's what I want you to know. It's never too late to return to yourself, to buy flowers just for your own table, to cook something that only you will eat, to write your name in big letters at the top of the page and say, this story is still going. We thought love meant giving everything away. But real love, the lasting kind, starts when we give something to ourselves. Time, patience, care, forgiveness. There are more of us than they know. We walk slow now, but our steps are sure. We cry in private, but we also laugh when no one expects it. We remember who we were before we were erased. And slowly, we're becoming her again. Or maybe we're becoming someone even stronger. Someone who's seen how it feels to be forgotten and chooses to remember. So if you're out there, in a small apartment or a quiet room, thinking your story has ended, hear me. It hasn't. You're still breathing, still blooming. Maybe no one says your name the way they used to. Maybe no one calls. But you are not gone. You are not broken. You are not invisible. You are part of a sisterhood, a quiet, powerful one, made of women who know the weight of sacrifice and the lightness of finally choosing themselves. We are not ghosts. We are gardens. And this right here is our second spring. They'll learn my name in the will. Not the version they buried, but the one who kept rising. The one who wrote with a trembling hand and a steady heart. I didn't need to shout my worth while I was alive. I lived it. I stitched it into baby blankets, into birthday cards, into every quiet act of care they mistook for weakness. But paper holds what memory tries to erase, and I wrote it all down. They'll open the will thinking it's theirs by default. Blood, after all, comes with expectations. But ink doesn't lie. Not the kind I used. Black and permanent and slow. My name at the bottom, my words above. Line by line, I rewrote the ending. Not for revenge, for clarity, for peace, for truth. The house went to someone else. Someone who saw me, who asked how my day was, and waited for the answer. Someone who brought me soup when I was sick, and didn't ask for anything back. The savings went to the girl who works at the flower shop, the one who calls me Miss N, and always says, my scarf looks beautiful. She's starting school next fall. She'll find the envelope with her name on it. And inside she'll see that kindness is never wasted. It just blooms later. I left letters, dozens, some long, some just a line, some wrapped in ribbon, some tucked into recipe books and behind photo frames. I didn't write to guilt them. I wrote to remind them, to show them I had a voice, even when they stopped listening. One day, they'll find letters in the attic, signed in love and truth. To Mia, you were always so bright. I saw it, even when no one looked. Shine for yourself, not for their approval. To Lucas, you held my finger once and wouldn't let go. Hold on to who you are, not what they tell you to be. To my son, you were my whole world. I don't know when that stopped being enough for you, but I kept loving you anyway. Not because you deserved it, but because I did. I know they'll sit in the living room, the one I used to dust every Sunday, and read those letters in silence. Not because they understand, but because there's nothing left to take, only things to feel. I hope it stings. Not in cruelty, but in clarity. I hope they feel the outline of what they had and what they chose to lose. I left the rocking chair to no one. Just ask that it stay near a window. Maybe someone will sit in it one day and wonder who I was. And maybe the wind will carry a whisper. She was here. She mattered. She loved. I didn't need them to remember me in birthday speeches or family slideshows. I left my legacy in the quiet, in the gentle, in the firm choice to protect myself when no one else would. I made peace not by forgetting, but by forgiving. even if they never asked for it. Especially because they never did. You see, the end isn't a fade to black. It's a page turned, a letter opened, a breath taken without grief. I lived, I lost, I learned, and I left truth behind me like breadcrumbs, not for them to follow, but for others like me to know you can choose yourself. You can begin again. You can end well. They'll learn my name in the will, not as a burden, not as a ghost, but as a woman who saw what was done and chose not to vanish, but to write, to plant, to rise, quietly and fully. They sent lilies for a woman they said was dead. White ones, pretty ribbon, cards signed from all of them like I was some stranger on a sympathy list. With love and deepest regrets. I stared at them sitting on my doorstep like they hadn't declared me gone with full confidence just a year before. A bouquet for show. A guilt trip dressed up in petals and perfume. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I picked them up carefully, politely, and packed them back in the box they came in. Slipped in a note, folded once. You had your chance to grieve. I sent them back. That's the thing with performative regret. It always arrives too late, too dressed up, and too concerned with how it looks. They wanted a ribbon on it. A neat little moment of redemption they could tuck in their conscience. We tried. We reached out. They didn't reach out, they reached back. Only after the door was already closed. After I had built a life around their silence. After I had made peace with the sound of no one calling my name. I remember the day I saw her post online, her standing in front of my old house with a caption about family legacy and blessing to carry it forward. No mention of the woman who raised that house from nothing, who polished every window, who baked love into its walls. They made me disappear in real life, and then made themselves heroes in the version they curated for others. I didn't comment. I didn't share. I didn't scream. I just printed the post and filed it away under evidence of who they chose to be. So when the flowers came, I didn't melt. I didn't ache. I remembered. I remembered the couch they sold without asking. The photo albums boxed and labeled old stuff. The years of no visits, no calls, no cards. I remembered the sound of my own voice asking, do they know who I am? And hearing silence in return. That kind of silence stays in your bones. And no bouquet makes it better. They tried again, a few weeks later. A fruit basket this time. A handwritten card. Her handwriting, not his. Of course. She's always been the voice. The gatekeeper. The one who smiled while locking doors. We hope you're well. The children miss you. Let's talk? I didn't answer. I made a pie that day. Just for me. Saturday in my chair, ate a slice with real whipped cream. And read the note one more time. Then I folded it and used it to start a fire in the garden pit. That card made a good flame. Burned fast. Left nothing but ash. Just like their apologies. People think forgiveness is about letting others back in. It isn't. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go of the hope that they'll ever understand what they did. It means setting down the weight of waiting for them to change. I forgave them when I stopped needing them to see me. When I realized that the version of me they chose to forget, she was never gone. She was just standing in the quiet, learning to be free. There was a time when I would have kept those lilies, placed them in water, told myself it was a start. But starts don't count when the finish was a funeral they threw while I was still breathing. I already mourned what we had. I already said my goodbyes not to them, but to the idea that they'd ever come back in the right way. I don't owe them an open door. I don't owe them a seat at my table. They sent flowers because they thought I was still soft, still hopeful, still waiting. But I wasn't. I was living. I was laughing with people who knew my name without needing to be reminded. I was wrapping gifts for children down the hall, sending birthday cards to a single mom who lets me braid her daughter's hair on Sundays. I was pouring into people who pour back. I don't hate them. That would mean they still had power. They don't. What I feel now is simple, clear, like a window with no curtain, just light and truth, and nothing left to hide. They sent lilies for a woman they said was dead. I sent them back. Because I'm not a ghost. I'm not an obligation. I'm not a second chance they get to feel good about. I'm still here, fully, quietly, without them. And that's the part they never expected.